Hi all, in this lab, let us understand how to implement error handling for the Lambda executions. Okay, when an event is sent to Lambda and the Lambda does some processing, and on success, it can configure one API destination. On failure also, we can configure one more API destination. Okay, so in the case of success, we have configured one CloudWatch event bus, and for failure, we will configure an SQS queue. Okay, so let us understand how this architecture looks like. So we have three event buses. One is the default one, which is called default. Then two event buses, custom one or order and inventory. And for the orders event bus, we have defined two rules. Okay. The rule one is configured for the target step function, and the rule two is configured for the target CloudWatch logs. Okay. And the event bus inventory has one rule, and the rule one is configured for CloudWatch logs. Okay. Now, how does it work? So let us say when we send a custom event through AWS CLI to the orders event bus, based upon the event patterns, the event gets matched and the rule one triggers the step function. Step function, when it executes, it will send an event back to the orders event bus, which in turn will be matched for the rule 2, and CloudWatch event Lambda will be triggered, okay, for the rule 2. So the Lambda can be successful or can fail. If it is successful, that is on success, the Lambda is configured for a destination called event bus, which is inventory. Okay, and so basically there are, you can configure the on success or on failure destinations for Lambda. So in the case of on success, the EventBridge event bus called inventory is configured, and for failure mode, we have configured an SQS queue. So where the events will be captured in SQS queue for later processing. So this is how the end-to-end architecture looks like for the error handling or the Lambda execution. So now let's go to the source code to see how to implement this in Terraform. Okay, so in this lab, let us understand how to implement the error handling functionality for Lambda executions using Terraform. Okay, so let's go to the EventBridge.tf. Here we are defining one event bus called orders, and which has two rules. Okay, the first rule is basically looking at the event patterns, which source is equal to com.aws.orders, and the details can have location, and the location can be EU West or EU East. Okay, and the second rule is basically the source is same and the detail type is order process. This is from the state machine. The state machine workflow that we are defining will be sending an events based on this order type. Then from the targets perspective, the first one is a state machine target, okay, state function, and the second one is a Lambda function. Okay, now there are few configuration to enable some IAM policies, and we are defining one more event bus called inventory, and this has one rule, and any event which is having account is equal to the particular account number will be matching this particular rule. So the rules will invoke the CloudWatch log group. Okay, so this is a typical code that we have seen from the previous labs. Now in the Lambda, if you go to the Lambda, then we have one event processor Lambda, which is based on Python. And here we are allowing this particular event bus rule to invoke the Lambda. Okay, and there are few IAM permissions here. Now let's go to SQS queue. SQS queue is very simple. We have some resource policy to allow any IAM principal to send messages to this. Okay, and we also have state functions configuration, simple state function which will process the event and send an event back to the orders event bus. Okay, now what is important to understand is in the case of Lambda, so this configuration we need to keep in mind. So on um, success, we are configuring basically bridge event bus, and for on failure we're configuring a SQS queue. Now let's go to the console and see how this looks like. Okay, so we are in the event bus console. So there are two event buses orders and orders has two rules. One rule for the state function and step function basically, and the second one is basically the the Lambda. Okay, so if you go to the second one, the target is a Lambda. Okay, now if you see the Lambda configuration, how does it look like? Okay, um, let me open that in a separate window. Yeah, so in the Lambda, the triggering is coming from an event bridge. Okay, so this is when a step function processes the event and sends an event back to the event bus orders. The second rule gets triggered and the Lambda will be invoked. And for the Lambda on success, we are sending sending it to a destination for called EventBridge. The second one on failure, we're sending it to SQS queue. Okay. Now let us see how does it work in action. Okay. Now I'm just run this event custom event through CLI. So if you see the event configuration, this will contain a special configuration. Okay. So if you see this, the event will have orders details, and this will have force error is equal to true. Okay, so this is the configuration which will trigger the Lambda to create an error exception basically. Okay, to create the on failure scenario. So I've run this already. So this is the event name. Now let us go to the first state function to see whether the execution has happened or not. Okay, so the state function, there is an execution. Okay, the function completed the execution. Now then let us go to the Lambda. Okay, so this is the Lambda function, and for the Lambda function the logs are here. Okay, let me open the logs for the Lambda. So go to monitor and CloudWatch logs. So before we go to the logs, let's first understand how the code looks like. Okay, so in the Lambda function, which is simple Python script, so we are basically looking at few fields inside the event called force error. If this field is available and it is true, then we are creating an exception. Okay, so these are the Lambda executions. So if you see, the failure exception is triggered. So this is a confirmation that Lambda is giving an error. That means the event is sent to SQS queue, which is configured as a target. Okay, now let us go to the SQS queue uh, and see whether there's any particular event has arrived to this SQS queue. So if you see the orders event queue, I already have one message available. So which means, so if I go here and look for send and receive messages and see the old messages, yeah, there is one message available. Okay, so which confirms that the message is coming to the SQS queue. So this is a message that we have sent it. Okay, so this contains all the information about where it is coming from, and the entire context we can find it here for any debugging purpose. Okay, so just to summarize, what we have demonstrated is basically to create two destinations for Lambda: on failure SQS queue and on success EventBridge event bus. Okay, and we saw an end-to-end flow. So we created an event, that event triggered state function and state machine executed, and that state machine sends an event back to the orders event bus, which in turn triggered the second rule, which is Lambda. Lambda on failure triggered SQS queue. I mean, invoked SQS queue with the event details. Okay, so this is how we can implement end-to-end asynchronous error handling mechanism.